What's the password? Welcome to the Game Master Speakeasy. Brought to you by the record button.
Hello and welcome to the Game Master Speakeasy. My name is Cody.
And I'm Lance.
So come on in. You found yourself at the Game Master Speakeasy, but anyone who has even the fleeting interest in tabletop role-playing games or just kind of nerd stuff in general is welcome to come in and sit down, relax, and enjoy. Today, the bartender, his name is Olaf. You can go get a nice alcoholic beverage if you are of age, or just something delicious and tasty, or thirst quenching if you are not of age.
Milk in a dirty glass.
We're going to sit here and talk about tabletop role-playing games, maybe some other stuff too that is tangentially related. But first, Lance, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am okay. I'm kind of excited for a something that I get to play with when I get home, alone in the garage.
Okay.
All right, but first, let's talk about news. I have my drink here next to me. Go get yours, sit down next to the ever-burning hearth, and listen as we talk about Viking Verse. Are you familiar with the Viking Verse?
I am not familiar with the Viking Verse, but it sounds like something I'd like to be familiar with.
So honestly, I don't remember the author's name off the top of my head. I think it was Ian Stewart Sharp. Apparently, I do remember the name. Anyway, he is the author of, I think there's some comics and some novels set in basically like sci-fi Norse mythology.
Okay.
And it's during Ragnarok, if Ragnarok were happening in like a sci-fi future Norse mythology.
Okay, so we're talking like Too Human?
I'd never played that, but I think kind of, maybe?
That game was like unfortunately never made it into the sequels that it should have, but that was a really neat like Norse mythology sci-fi game. You play as Baldur, and his whole shtick is that like most of the Norse gods in the Pantheon have gotten this powerful because they've gotten cybernetic attachments. Like, that's their path to godhood.
Okay.
And Baldur is considered to be too human because he doesn't take to the augmentations like the others do. He doesn't like them. But anyway, yeah, so that sounds like a cool setting, and I like the idea.
Okay. That's pretty cool to know. Then it may or may not be similar to that. I saw art from the core rulebook, because this is a tabletop roleplay. Basically, the news piece is that there is a tabletop role-playing game set in this Viking Verse that just hit Kickstarter. Well, by the time that this releases, it didn't just hit Kickstarter. At the time of recording, there's like less than 2 weeks left. But it's news to us, and if you're listening to this, it might be news to you, so check it out. It is powered by the Shadow of the Demon Lord system.
I was about to ask, which system are they running this on?
It's on the bones of Shadow of the Demon Lord, which means it should be relatively easy to run. So you've still got semi-tactical combat, and then really easy to run role-playing checks. Essentially.
How does the Demon Lord system stack up when it comes to ranged combat? You know, have you read enough of it to give me a?
Well, I don't quite remember. I think it's not too dissimilar from Lancer, because Lancer is based on Shadow of the Demon Lord,
okay.
or at least the role playing section is. You'll have to go read it yourself.
Yeah,
because I read Shadow of the Demon Lord, but that was like 2 months ago.
Okay.
So in just that one read I did, I can't quite remember. What really stood out to me about Shadow of the Demon Lord was the way initiative worked. You just declare that you want to take a like full turn or a fast turn, and then you default to the players going first. So if everyone in the party wants to do a fast turn, and all the players who want to do a fast turn get to go first, then the enemies who want to do a fast turn. And I think the difference is whether you get one action or two actions.
Okay, then if you declare full turn, you're playing on taking two, basically. Okay.
And then so if everyone wants to do a full turn, but then the monster does a quick turn, then the monster gets to go first.
Okay.
And that's what I remember. I like that because there's no stopping. You don't say, hey, roll initiative. We take 2 minutes to everyone roll their dice and write down the results. You just jump right into combat, which really helps with flavor. So to have sci-fi Vikings just jumping right into combat, I really like that. I saw a piece of artwork that was showing the Berserker, and the Berserker had like this really cool rifle that looked like it had 2 barrels, and he had super sci-fi power armor on that kind of looked like pretty sweet. But it's supposed to be set the universe where Christianity was put to the sword and Viking mythology rules both the sea and the stars and their spaceships and things like that. And then Ragnarok happens or something like that. I don't know. I've never read any books, but I just know that I like Viking stuff. I'm excited because the new God of War game, God of War Ragnarok, will release, I think, later this year, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they had the release trailer happen not too long ago. I mean, I'll buy it day one.
Right.
Like, that's,
of course.
that's happening.
I don't buy a lot of single-player games day one, but but God of War Viking.
Well, I mean,
the first one was great.
You know me. I do about an annual playthrough of the entire God of War series front to back. Like, about every year or every 2 years, I sit down at the beginning of that series.
Chronologically or by release date?
Chronologically. So I play the story in order from front to back. So I start with Ascension and, move my way through it.
So if I asked you to make a YouTube video where you just explain the lore of God of War, you could do it without having to have reference material.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I have played through that game series a lot. Even the newest one, I think I've been through 4 times.
Wow.
So
I have only played that 1.5 times, so that's pretty dedicated of you.
My kids beat it twice at least.
Do you feel any kinship with the protagonist for some reason?
I mean, he's a bald guy with a beard, so you got
that was my joke. So anyway, by the time this episode comes out, if you're listening to it, the Viking Verse RPG is called When the Wolf Comes. It's powered by Shadow the Demon Lord, and the Kickstarter will have already ended, but I'm sure you could still find a place to pre-order it on BackerKit or something. I'd be surprised if you couldn't. Check it out. Other news, we just had San Diego Comic-Con happen very recently, and even though we have not played a superhero RPG yet, it's on my to-do list. It's on my bucket list of things to run. So we're going to talk about Marvel Phase 5 for a brief amount of time. Were you aware that they had announced officially Marvel Phase 5?
Yes, I am familiar with the announcement of it. Honestly, I haven't seen anything past Endgame.
Okay. I am pretty stoked for Secret Invasion, which is it's going to be a more S.H.I.E.L.D.-focused thing because it's centering on Nick Fury, Samuel Jackson's character, and I can't remember. I think it's Maria something or other. Kobe Smolder's character. She's like she's like his lieutenant.
She was from How I Met Your Mother.
Yeah. She's of How I Met Your Mother fame, but then she played that S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. Maria Hill. That's it. Maria Hill, and they're going to deal with the Skrulls. Are you familiar with the Skrulls?
They're shape-shifting aliens.
They're the shape-shifting aliens, and that's why it's a secret invasion, because they're
because they're shapeshifters.
Because they're shapeshifters. I'm pretty excited for that. That's going to premiere on Disney Plus. Of course, I love Guardians of the Galaxy, so they've announced a Guardians of the Galaxy 3. They've got Marvels. Did you watch Loki Season 1?
I haven't seen any Disney Plus anything.
Because you don't subscribe to Disney Plus at all, so you've missed out on everything that's on there so far.
Correct.
Oh man, I will say that Loki was so good. Loki was so good. I wish that you would subscribe just for like a month and binge it. Anyways, that's kind of related because they had, what was it, last year? We talked about, was it earlier this year or last year we talked about the Marvel tabletop?
The one where if you roll like 616, it's like
that's
your
crit
bonus,
Yeah, if you roll 616, because it's going to be a D616 system, as they're calling it. That had its playtest. I still don't know when that's coming out, but I like that Phase 5 is announced because I don't know. I'm personally... if I'm going to rank my superhero fandom, it's going to be Batman at the top, then Marvel, and then the rest of DC. Right? Well, actually, no. I would put Valiant ahead of DC.
I was going to say, I like some of the more smaller, obscure comic book stuff.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I like X-O Man of War a lot.
There's a commentator that I listen to. His name's Eric July. He's a big comic book fan, too. He talks a lot about that. He has actually started his own comic book company called the Ripperverse.
Really?
Yeah, and I think they just kickstarted the first book that's coming, but he has this whole mission statement, he's like, I'm not rebooting the universe like the way these other comic book companies do. Anything that we do is canon, period, full stop.
I love that.
I like what he's doing. I've thought about buying his first book. It looks like good stuff, and this is a guy that, like us, is a big comic book fan. That
I
has
don't
taken
like reboots and I don't like crossovers.
He's-
If I'm reading Batman, I don't want to have to also get Red Robin number 58 or whatever. You
I don't know.
what I mean?
I don't know what his views are on crossovers, but I know that like the rebooting and the constant resetting of the universe
Yeah.
that these series have to do, he's adamantly against doing that.
Cool. I like that.
On the subject of superhero or comic book style tabletop games, I'm pretty sure that they have announced, and you might have to check me on this, but a sequel to or a reboot of the Necessary Evil module for Savage Worlds.
Really?
The Necessary Evil module, that is a superhero setting where you play as a bunch of villains. These aliens came down and wiped out all of the superheroes in the world.
Oh, so then the villains.
And the
have
villains
to...
basically, they're like, well, if we want to keep doing what we're doing, we're going to have to
Right.
put a stop to this. And I think there's a sequel coming out for the newest version of Savage Worlds.
That's pretty cool.
That might
be fun to play.
I didn't play the first one, but the cool thing is it's one of their plot point campaigns. So it's designed to be a X amount of sessions and then
Right.
you're done. Like
Right.
it's
You're
not
so, like-
you're not gonna run a 6-year campaign
It's
like we
an
do with this.
adventure start to finish.
Yeah, basically. So I have thought about looking into that because, I mean, we've talked a little bit about, I know you've never been super warm on Savage Worlds, but if I can get enough people on board for some Savage Worlds stuff for the playtest for the module that I'm making and stuff like that, if you guys want to do some superhero stuff, I would GM a Necessary Evil.
Oh, I would totally play in that.
Okay, yeah.
I'm interested in playing a superhero RPG, and then I'm also interested in running one. The one I'm looking at is Mutants and Masterminds,
Okay.
which is a D20 system, so
Okay.
that'd be pretty familiar for the group. Next on the news, let's keep moving on. Spelljammer is a... Are you familiar with that? I know
It's a D&D setting, isn't it?
it's a D&D setting.
Yeah.
So,
We talked
okay,
about
so,
it a little bit.
So how Starfinder is Pathfinder sci-fi'd up, Spelljammer is D&D in space. Mm-hmm. It's still like... It's still D&D. It's all fantasy. It's just that you're taking your fantasy through the phlogiston, I think is what it's called. I don't know.
Aren't your wizards like the ones piloting the ships
the
with
wizard has
magics?
to attune to the helm and pilot the because spelljammers are what the ships are called.
Yeah.
I've never played it, but that's where giant space hamsters enter the D&D canon because that's like an actual thing. I think
Giant space
hammers,
hamsters.
space hamsters. Anyway, if this episode is airing on the 21st of August, and I think the American release date for this book is 16th, so it's already out at the time of this.
Okay.
At the time you're hearing this, it's already out. Some other news: at the time of this recording, which is about a week ago, they also put out one of my favorite kinds of 5. Even though we're not playing 5e, this is the type of book that I will still buy and read through because it's 13 adventures.
Ooh.
I love the books that are a bunch of different adventures or an adventure, like things that I can steal from, essentially, good ideas for plot points. And it's called Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel. They are kind of introducing this as a canon location in the Forgotten Realms. The Radiant Citadel is a place in the ethereal plane, which is one of the planes that has kind of the least amount of lore to it, honestly. Anyway, the Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel has 13 standalone adventures set in wondrous lands for the world's greatest role-playing game. I am excited because, there's one caveat. It's levels 1 through 14. Do you know why that irks me?
No, but I'm sure you're going to tell me.
Because I am tired of them not making content for high levels.
You know, we've talked about this before. It is really weird how a lot of these level-based systems don't build out content for anything. I mean, most campaigns don't make it that far, but why not? I mean, is it a chicken or an egg thing? You know what I mean? If they're not building content for stuff up from 15 to 20, is that the reason that people are stopping their campaigns before 15 to 20?
Yeah.
Or is it the other way around? Is it because nobody wants to play? I don't know why you wouldn't want to play there. I want to get up to God mode.
Right.
As a player, like, if I know in most level-based systems, once you hit that peak 20, whatever the highest level is for that particular setting, you know, that's the point where if your characters were inclined to face down the gods or archdemons or just really, 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 really powerful stuff, that's when you do it. I want to be at that level. I want to see what that looks like. I want that power fantasy.
At what point does Wizards just give up and reduce it to 15 levels?
I mean, if you're not going to make content for it, you might as well just make the level cap 15 and call it a day.
I always see on Reddit threads and stuff people talking about, like, oh, if you do this, then you don't get your 20th level end cap. I'm like, okay, but no one
Whoever
runs
plays
that.
to level 20.
Yeah. God, we've been playing for how long, and we're only finally approaching it. I mean,
Yeah.
part of that was because of COVID.
Well,
but...
and I mean, we did play on and off. It was one of those things where we're going to put the campaign on hold for a little while, test some stuff out, play some other stuff, and then we've always come back to it. But no, I agree with you. You know, everybody worries about their end cap stuff. I look at the Barbarians end cap in 5th edition, where you get a whole bunch of extra constitution, a whole bunch of extra strength at level 20, and you think to yourself, but why wouldn't I multi-class? What's the chances of me running in a campaign that's going to make it all the way to level 20?
Oh, yeah. It's very, very slim. Yeah, unless you're starting from a higher level.
Well, like I said, is it a self-fulfilling prophecy that comes about because they don't make content for it? Because, I mean, you custom build most of your campaigns and don't run a lot of book adventures. I do the same thing, but there are GMs out there that run almost exclusively their content from these modules.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
if the modules cap out at 15, then why would you even aspire to run to 20 if you're not making your own content?
Which is, you know, sometimes people do those adventures, and then after they finish the book adventure, they keep the story going, and, you know, just go from there. But yeah, the book doesn't run you to 20. I would love to see a 5th edition book, an adventure that runs levels 1 to 20 that, well, isn't... I think Dungeon of the Mad Mage does it.
Does it the only one?
If I could be misremembering, but I think Dungeon of the Mad Mage does go to 20.
Okay.
Because there are X amount of floors of the dungeon. I could be wrong.
Okay.
But most of them stop long before then. Like
Well, yeah, I mean, all the
Storm King's Thunder, Curse of Strahd, those stop long before level 20.
most of the content that I've read from it, like pre-generated adventures for 5th edition and stuff like that, almost always they're either like low level up through 10 or like 10 through 15, and there's like nothing else.
Speaking of dungeons, actually, another piece of news that I recently learned, we've talked before about Level Up Advanced 5th Edition by whichever, N Publishing, I think was the one behind it. The people that are behind N World made the advanced, like, third-party Advanced 5th Edition.
Is that the one that makes it more crunchy?
Yeah, it's slightly more crunchy 5e.
Okay.
And this is another piece of news that I don't have on the thing, but I just remembered. They have a Kickstarter coming out later this year. I looked in multiple places and I couldn't find a date when the Kickstarter was going to happen, but I am keenly interested because I've always wanted to run a multi-level dungeon. That's something that we have never done. You know, like, you're in this dungeon for multiple levels,
Yeah.
like level ups, essentially. That's something we've never done. Entire campaigns have been built around mega dungeons. That's what Dungeon of the Mad Mage is. They have an entire book coming out on Kickstarter later this year called Dungeon Delver's Guide, and it's about crafting a dungeon and also working a story into it. The thing that piqued my interest the most is that they are going to have a dungeon building system in their book that is sufficient enough that they gave it a name called the Nodes system.
Okay.
So anytime that someone gives their rule set a name, that speaks to me that they believe that it is worthwhile enough.
They've taken it seriously.
That they are taking it seriously. Now, is that foolhardy? Like, am I going to go in there and be disappointed? I don't know. I'll find out when I get there. However, from what I've seen from Advanced 5th Edition, if I was going to run 5th Edition again, I'd do it with Level Up Advanced 5e.
See, you know what I think would be kind of a cool way to start a campaign? Have a bunch of, like, adventurers that are, like, level 3 to 5 that all get...
Because you hate starting at level 1.
I do hate starting at level 1. I absolutely loathe it. But let's start at level 3 to 5, and the whole party does not know each other and all gets kidnapped and dropped in this dungeon, and they have to find out why and survive the trip out of it.
Oh, that'd be cool.
You know, like the horror movies where people get drugged and end up in some, like, horrifying scenario, but then the party is forced to work together to survive. It kind of makes for a cool introduction that doesn't involve them all meeting in a tavern for no damn reason. And it gives you an excuse to make a big multi-level dungeon that they have to escape.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's actually kind of a neat idea. I like that. All right, that's something to think about. Anyway, for those people that want to learn more on crafting your dungeons to be very interesting, keep your eyes peeled for the Kickstarter on Dungeon Delver's Guide later this year. Last piece of news I have is very selfish. It's only related to tabletop in that it is related to a dead tabletop war game called Warhammer Fantasy Battles.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of the Total War Warhammer series.
Yes.
And Total War Warhammer 3's Immortal Empires beta releases on August 23rd, which is 2 days after the day this episode airs. So if you're listening to this episode on the day that it airs, know that 2 days later I am dead to the world. I'm going to be glued my ass to my computer chair. I've been considering canceling game night that night because it is a Tuesday. Because it's going to be all 3 games, factions, and races on one map. With big updates to some of the older factions, like vampire counts are getting an overhaul so that they can do more besides field skeletons and cast Death Wind of Magic.
Is it a Cthulhu night or is it a Pathfinder night?
Oh well, here's the thing: Cthulhu might not even be running at that point.
Okay,
anymore.
so it's a ways off.
It's a ways off that I haven't bothered to figure that out yet. Anyway,
well, if it's that far out, you could probably get away with canceling it. Nobody
Right,
does
yeah.
a tremendous amount of sleep over it.
but we're also not going to play the second because of Dan's got a function coming up, which I should probably tell the group that. Anyway, I'm so excited because the Warhammer Fantasy setting is so cool to me because the old world leans into the fact that it's kind of a ripoff of Lord of the Rings, and then it just turns, so in order to differentiate itself, it just turns up the grimdark to 11.
So it's like history is Lord of the Rings, sort of, and then everything that you're playing is after that when things got super crazy.
Yeah, I just love every character's origin story is like, oh, and then he fought through piles of orcs to reach his reach the commander. He died and was drug along 10 miles of rocky ground and his skin flayed from his muscles. It's just also,
gross.
13-year-old badass kind of like it kind of reads like a 13-year-old.
Like my edgy goth days in high school.
Right, yeah, it's just like everything has to be cranked up. The dark elf king, the witch king, his name is Malekith, and he walked through the fires of Ashurian to try to prove himself worthy as the Phoenix King, and it burned him horribly scarred, and now he wears big plate armor all the time like he's Darth Vader. And it's just a really cool setting, and the wiki is because it's been around. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Warhammer Fantasy happened before 40K.
Yeah.
40K is undoubtedly more popular.
Yes.
That's
the one I'm most familiar with.
But the lore of Warhammer Fantasy has been around. It started before 40K. So in the same way that you can get lost in the 40K wiki, I sometimes just go on the Warhammer Fantasy wiki and then just start clicking through links.
I have done that on 40K wiki. Crazy.
That's how you learn.
digging.
That's how you learn that the ogre over tyrant Grease's Goldtooth ate his own father to become the new over tyrant or something like that.
Is that how you become an over tyrant?
That comes out on.
Don't tell my kid.
Yeah, that comes out on August 23rd, and I am so stoked for it. Anyway, on to our RPG experience for the week. So what have you done? I don't have a lot to talk about.
No,
because we haven't played Pathfinder or Call of Cthulhu yet. We've got our upcoming Call of Cthulhu game that will probably. My guess is it will somehow, for better or worse, wrap up the current adventure.
Okay.
We got to hurry because if we don't get to the drink, mine will be gone by the time we get there.
I mean, other than just printing minis en masse, I know that we could talk about our soon. Well, you've got yours already. Mine's coming.
Yeah, that's actually you and I.
Is that
both
our new
have,
section? Just new printers.
That's actually what I have here. Got a new printer to set up. Both you and I have ordered the Photon Mono 4K.
Yep, got
we
the 4K,
are not
baby.
we are not fancy enough yet to drop the money for the Photon X 6K or any of the 8K printers.
Is that like an $800 one?
Yeah, that's where you start to push it, right?
Yeah,
it was just on sale for $200. That is well within my price. They say a
couple $100 on a printer.
If you're gonna buy an expensive object, could you buy it twice? Mm-hmm. Right, and if you can, then you can work it into your budget.
Yep.
I could buy a $200 printer twice if I had to. The $700 printer, that might make me a little queasy.
Well, my question is always, how much better is the 700 than the 200?
Right.
Like, is it $500 better, or is it more like an extra $150 better?
Well, you've been running the older version back here that has 8 6-second layer height print times. So yours is a 2-generation jump essentially.
Yeah, I was gonna say because you sold me this one. Mm-hmm. And you bought 1 generation above this, so you're only making 1 generation jump. I'm just
But supposedly it's 2 times better than the one I had.
I mean, I was just happy when you told me that it's got like 2-second layer times because that's going to reduce my print times by like 66%.
Speaking of printing, I printed out some water tiles from Cast and Play Miniatures, which they basically have this system that someone else came up with, where you can have like dungeon tiles, and they have this locking mechanism that you can use to lock them together.
Okay.
And these water tiles, I've started printing. They use up a decent amount of resin, but once you have them, you can use them for the rest of your life, right? Because they're like, oh, it's water.
Yeah, just
I'm going to use it anytime I need water on the map, right? So I printed those out, and I have them primed, but I haven't painted them yet. I'm just going to use some quick dry brushing.
How many different terrain tiles did you get? Water?
Well, I specifically bought the water ones when we were running the pirate campaign.
Okay. That makes sense.
They have many tiles for sale, and I thought about buying more, but I decided to buy the printer instead than buying STLs.
Well, and you can always
I
buy
have so many STLs.
You can always buy the terrain as needed too.
Right.
If you're like,
That's
we're gonna go
kinda
do
what
some
I'm
desert stuff. I'll buy some desert stuff.
I for a while I was falling into a trap where I was buying STLs just because they were good value, and it's like I don't print 80% of them. So am I really saving money? It's that, it's how when you go to the store and something's on sale and you end up spending more money that you wouldn't have, you didn't really save money. You spent more money than you should have.
I didn't need this
You didn't need it.
But I'm a sucker for a deal, and it was on sale.
But anyway, we're looking forward to what happens with your Warlock next session, and then we're also looking up to wrapping up Call of Cthulhu. But other than that, we're just printing and painting. All right, so on to what we're drinking today, served by our dear bartender Olaf. What do we got?
This is a Lion Bridge Lemon Lime Cheesecake Bar.
I love it.
It is an ale with key lime, mayor lime, cream cheese, and graham cracker. It is very citrusy.
I like, and as we talked about in the last episode, I like citrus.
I do too. I don't know how many of these I could get away with drinking all at once because it is very potent, but I do. It's a very interesting, unique, and flavorful beer.
They sell them as a 4-pack, and I could drink all 4. I don't know that I would get tired of it.
I think two.
My
I
fiance
think two
hated
would
it.
be my limit on this guy. It's not a bad beer, but it's not something that I can just guzzle.
It's very citrus forward, and I'm all about that.
It is. It does have. You can taste kind of that creamy cream cheese to it.
Yeah,
like
the graham cracker is
texture.
the most subtle. I feel like they listed the flavors in order of prominence.
That's true.
In the same way that the ingredients list is listed on our nutritional data.
It's got graham cracker, but I'm not getting a lot of graham cracker.
I'm getting a lot of key lime and Meyer lemon.
Yeah, no. I might save a little bit of this for the wife and see if she wants to give it a go.
Oh yeah, it's pretty good. So as we drink our lemon lime cheesecake bar, let's talk about world building.
Okay.
Let's talk about how world building is one of the most enjoyable things a dungeon master or a game master can do, is to create your own homebrew setting. It doesn't matter what system that you prefer to put it in. You pick the system that works for you. You pick the system that your players want to play and the one that you want to run. At some point, you have to consider how your setting interacts with your system. But what I'm talking about is when you're coming up with the lore of your world, where do you start? Do you have any ideas, Lance?
I think that you need to have a theme right out of the gate.
Okay, so you want to start with the theme first and foremost.
Yeah, I think so. Well, because our current project that is centered in Norse mythology, the theme for that was obviously Norse mythology.
Well, on top of Norse mythology is important, but what else is included in that? You wanted to. I remember that you talked about how you wanted it to be heroic. You wanted it to be. So, like, not grimdark. You don't want it to be simulationist. You want it to be heroic
I am
fantasy.
Perfectly okay watching my players' characters wade through weaker enemies.
Oh yeah,
like I don't want it to be one of those where your power level is 1-to-1 with the average mook that's on the tabletop.
Right, where every fight is a
struggle. No, I want to watch a Viking berserker wade through a sea of characters, leaving a just bloody
wall
path
of
in his
Draugr
way.
ahead.
Yeah, just Draugr, or like if they're raiding a village, all the people defending it, or whatever, whatever the opposition is.
The ill-equipped peasant militia.
Yeah, just wading through that, that sea of blood and gore.
Right.
But I mean, if you want, because fantasy settings, for example, come in a number of flavors. Back to the Warhammer thing. Do you want a setting that is very grimdark and feels very oppressive to everybody playing it? Because that is going to require a vastly different amount of world building than if you just want a general high fantasy Magic campaign.
And when you're talking about this is kind of where the system interacts with the setting, and it does become important. Despite what I said earlier, having a system and a setting interact well is like it's one of those the sum is greater than its parts kind of things.
Yeah, see, and I'm kind of a build-a-better mousetrap guy. If I have a setting and I can't find a good system for it, and there's plenty of systems out there, so if you're not a build-a-better mousetrap guy, find one. But
Yeah,
I'm the
'cause
kind of
there might
person
be
that I will just start engineering my own system.
Yeah.
Like, well, I'll just build one from scratch. Who cares?
That's another thing that you can do as a game master is hack systems to work in your favor. Change rules so as you see fit. So you've got your building blocks here where you've got the type of themes you want to run. All right, let's say that you're going to do a heroic fantasy setting. This is this is what D&D is, whether it be sword and sorcery or heroic fantasy or grimdark fantasy. A lot of people are playing 5th edition or Pathfinder or anything that is a competitor for that, right? So if you're going to be building a heroic fantasy world like that, where do you start in that world? So let's assume you're playing one of these games, Pathfinder or D&D. Where do you start to build your world?
I generally start with the opposing forces.
Okay.
Whether that be the gods, and the gods being the good gods and the bad gods, or whether you have let's say one of the overarching themes of your campaign is this evil army that's marching across the land causing all this trouble.
I know that you haven't watched it, probably, but Matt Colville has a video on this, actually, about the central tension.
Does he?
is what
Okay, yeah,
calls it.
that's...
So if you haven't watched that video...
I haven't, but
yeah,
I think that's what I'm getting at, though.
Yeah,
is
exactly.
Whatever the...
I recommend it to everyone listening.
Especially because I always think that if you're doing kind of a more grimdark setting, it has to be a more grounded setting. You should be almost less worried about what the gods are up to, and more worried about what the humans or the mortal races in service to those gods are up to. If that means that there's a massive evil army, or even just like a misunderstood army that is ransacking things and marching across, the world or this particular continent or this particular country. What are their motivations? What are they doing? Why are they doing it? What's the ramifications of that? What does it mean to the average villager that this is going on? I mean, are the villages living in this constant state of tension because they know that this army is slowly moving its way across the land and eventually is going to get to them? Do you have huge amounts of people migrating to the bigger kingdoms for safety as their villages are being overtaken? Stuff like that. You have to kind of... At least where I'm going to start is I'm going to start at the forces that are at play.
Okay. So whatever the major players are in your world.
That is correct, yes.
So it's somewhat related to what you said. I like to start with the gods themselves. Mm-hmm. If there is a setting that has gods, I like to flesh out the Pantheon first. And usually fleshing out the Pantheon, you can do it one of two ways. What is the culture like, and what are the types of gods that they worship? And that can inform the type of gods that you create for your world.
Well, and I think that also depends on how active the gods are in the world.
Right,
like,
exactly.
The more active the gods are, the more that you have to flesh them out.
Yeah, if they are major players that actively respond with words, like complete sentences rather than cryptic clues.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a goddess of nature that's more of an abstracted idea than an active force in the universe, that requires a little less fleshing out than if you have this active goddess or god that is doing stuff that is noticeable to the players and influential on it. I mean, like if you had a world that didn't have clerics in it, for example, your necessity to flesh out the gods becomes substantially less.
Oh yeah, if there's no divine magic, then
even if the gods are there, you don't have to worry too much about them, because at that
then
point
you have
they're
to worry
operating in
about
the abstract.
why is there no divine magic? Is there a reason?
Have
for
the gods abandoned us?
Were they never there to begin with?
Did something scary imprison and or destroy them?
Imagine running a setting where there's no divine magic, and that's because there's no gods, and then the players after the end of their campaign become the first gods in the entire world.
That's a wild idea.
You get to play like as the progenitor.
That's a cool idea.
Yeah,
there's some cosmic force in the world that allows people to ascend, but there's no actual gods
There's
there
no gods
in
yet.
filling those roles.
Yeah.
And your players become the first. That could be pretty wild.
Yeah.
Or I would almost like to see a setting where whatever the major big bad evil is, not the big bad evil to the players, but the actual setting's big bad evil, has actually killed the gods.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you're living in a world where, like, divinity has existed. It's not like an atheistic world in the sense that there is no God.
That's kind of like what Shadow of the Demon Lord kind of is.
Did it?
Because you're playing. It's called Shadow of the Demon Lord because it's like the Demon Lord one.
Oh,
That's why the name of the setting, because you're living in the shadow of the Demon Lord.
I have not read enough of that to that sounds cool.
Shadow of the Demon Lord is basically the Victor Apocalypse. The bad guy has already kind of won, or is towards the end of winning.
That's pretty pimp.
Yeah, that's kind of the basis of the setting. And I think gods might still exist, but I don't know whether or not the gods are quote-unquote dead.
Even if they weren't destroyed, if they were imprisoned or locked away by whatever the major evil was, that would be a pretty wild kind of setting to play in.
So in addition to the gods, the next thing I think about is the nature of magic. If you're playing a fantasy game, magic is... When you look at the Wikipedia definition of what defines the fantasy genre of novels, it is basically the inclusion of magic. Some form of magic is what transforms your novel from fiction to fantasy fiction. And so if you're playing in a fantasy game, I assume magic will be involved somehow. Even if it's just super rare and there's only 5 wizards that exist, or whether it's Eberron and everyone knows a cantrip or 2. Magic is something that you need to have figured out. Where does it come from? Where does it go?
Cotton Eye Joe? Yeah, no, and figure out what it is capable of. Because depending on the setting,
how is it harnessed?
Some forms of magic can alter reality. Maybe you don't want magic to be that powerful in your setting. Maybe magic can only conjure, say, the basic elements. You can make a little bit of fire or move a little bit of water, do a little Avatar style, where that's, it's a smaller factor.
Which is an important thing. Are you born with it? Can you be trained in it? That's something that I always approach. The first 2 things when I think about making a fantasy world. What are the gods like, if there are gods, and what is the nature of magic? Then from there, I go on to the nations. I will take the first nation that the players are going to start in, and then the nearby nation that they might be in a kerfuffle with.
And then out from there.
Yes. So once you have these 3 outer things, in my opinion, that's enough to now zoom in on the map and flesh out the nearby area of whatever village or tavern your players are starting in.
Well, and you know what I think is fun about world building in a tabletop game? You don't have to finish before you start.
Exactly, yeah.
Like, you can let the players kind of build the world for you. For example, if you fleshed out, like, the kingdom that you're immediately in and, like, the major players around that, and somebody comes up with a character idea that involves coming from a faraway kingdom that you haven't even created or thought about yet, you're like, cool, I'm going to make this. I'm going to take this player's idea, and I'm going to make it a part of the canon of the world.
Right, your player approaches you and is like, oh, I know that the primary nation we're starting in doesn't have a lot of gunpowder, but is there, like, a nation across the ocean that does have gunpowder?
There is now.
You just look at them, and in your brain you're like, oh, I didn't think of that. But then you just look at them dead in the face and say, yes, yes, there is.
And I mean that's only applicable if it's a setting that you think gunpowder should be applicable in.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, if they pitch an idea to you and you're like, yeah, this works really well, I like this idea, it fits great in my vision of this world, then congratulations, your players just did you a huge favor by giving you the seed of this idea that you could then help build up into this thing that, will eventually be a part of the overall canon of your universe.
In my heroic fantasy world, I like when you guys come up with your character concepts, I always encourage you to just make up a town. Like, if your characters are from a small town instead of one of the... Because I flesh out all the capital cities in the nations.
Yeah.
But if you guys have, like, a small town idea, I love that you can just come to me with that, and then we can put it on the map.
You write it in your notes.
Yeah,
you're
write it in the notes. I
I
put a little dot on the map on the program I use for the app building, which, admittedly, I still have to finish that map, but I haven't needed it in a while, so anyway.
We'll get back to it eventually.
Yeah, that's another thing you get to do, is make a map.
I hate making maps.
Well, and
I loathe it.
if you don't have a clear vision, there's a lot of fun ideas out there for making maps, because your players are going to want to look at a map. Most of the time, if you say, "Hey," I think it's just part of even Lord of the it's his fault, right? It's his fault because Tolkien has a map right there. And now every fantasy novel has a map in the front of it, and so now and then D&D has a map, and just it's implied that if you have a fantasy game, there's going to be a fantasy
to have a map.
You kind of have to have a map, and there's a lot of free tools out there. There's a lot of cheap tools out there.
I was going to say,
I personally recommend Wonderdraft. It's a one-time purchase, and then you have the license forever.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of really good ones, but I tend to loathe anything that involves a subscription. Like, as a program, if it's a program that I'm going to need on and off for years.
Oh, yeah.
Because I don't have the sense to cancel it if I'm not using it, to come back to it later. So for Wonderdraft, because I have Wonderdraft too, I think. That's the one we've been using for our game.
Wonderdraft and Dungeon Draft are both good.
And
we are not sponsored.
No, we are not. But I like that program because it is a one-time purchase. I think you can go back and purchase different bonus packs to it that add different kinds of icons and stuff that you can use.
You can get
but
more
at its
assets.
base level, it's like $30-some, I think, if I remember right. And once you got it, which is great because it makes it a lot easier for you to be able to do that. I kind of wish the program came with a quote-unquote random generation function where you could say, I want a map that is this many miles by this many miles, and like maybe set basic criteria for terrain, and then just click a button and have it make a map.
I was going to say, there is a random land generation one, but I don't think it fills out mountains and stuff.
Yeah, see, I would
you can generate random continents in it, but it's, yeah.
I mean, that's still helpful, because, I mean, for me...
Okay, what about what if you're going to hand draw it? You don't have a computer. You don't have fancy software. You just got your big pads of paper. I have never done it, but I've always wanted to do that thing where you just take a bunch of dice
and throw
it out on a piece of paper, and like D4s are islands, D6s represent primary landmass, D8s are mountains.
Now, you know what we need? A computer program that will throw a random set of computerized dice on that.
And then...
Because my thing with the random map is, if I have a random map on paper, at some point I'm going to have to transfer it to something digitally, which means I'm going to have to put in the work regardless.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas if you had a program that did exactly that, that would be cool. Like,
oh yeah, that would be awesome.
Just like random handful of dice thrown on a map, and then it just kind of generates those things based on that criteria. I think that'd be neat.
I saw a TikTok the other day of someone doing that same idea, but they just used beans, like uncooked beans.
Yeah, no, I mean, you could use anything for it. I mean, that's, if you're going really low tech when you're doing your maps, a large piece of paper and any kind of marker that you can throw at it, as long as you know what those mean and you can draw stuff around them, it works.
So we've got maps, we've got religion, we've got the way the gods interact with the world and their followers. We have your cultures kind of that wind into both the religion and the way your governments and nations work. How are taxes worked? These are the types of things that you got to have figured out. But what I want to stress to the player is that once you have these basic building blocks, the game master, to the game master, once you have these basic building blocks in place, then focus on the smaller bits. It's important that you know the way the world works, because in the previous episode of the rule versus rule of cool, you talked about how, as the player, it's important that you know how the rules work. Because if the rules suddenly change, now you don't know how the world works, which is an important statement about world building. And that is why the system and the setting interacting with each other, it can be important at times, because you need to know how the world works. Once you know how the world works, you can populate the tavern where they're starting at and flesh out the bartender and the quests nearby. Anything else to add?
No, not really.
Okay. So yeah, once you've got the natural laws and the basic background information, anything else can just be, it can come as needed, if need be. Start small and work your way out. Because otherwise you're going to do a ton of work, and then you might be really excited about the politics between the elves of Narragond and the dwarven nation of Gorthak, and the players don't give a crap because that's 1,100 miles away minimum before you even reach the border.
You know, that's all the more reason to let your players help inform the smaller parts of that world to give them something to care about.
Yeah. So get some of the important big stuff out of the way, and then start small. That's all I have to say on the subject for now. Maybe in a future episode we can talk really deep dive into the different subsets of world building. I think we could do an entire episode on magic and religion and nations each.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So for that, thank you for joining us today. I hope that you have enjoyed your beverage in the comfort of the ever-burning hearth here at the Game Master Speakeasy, whether you be player or Game Master or just random interested person. If you want to reach out to us, the email that Lance and I and both have access to and read, we would like to hear your questions, respond to topics here on the podcast. It is gmspeakeasyofficial@gmail.com. And we look forward very much to hearing your topics. Not that I'm lacking in ideas, but it's a lot of fun to respond to people. We've only gotten to do it a couple times. Other than that, we hope that you get home safe.
See ya.
Want to hear more from the record button? You can find us wherever you find podcasts, like Transistor, Stitcher, Spotify, and YouTube. To stay up to date on our releases, find us on Facebook at the Record Button Production Group and on Twitter at TRBPRODGRP. Or stop by our website at recordbuttongroup.com, where we have links to our merch and other shows such as Wasteland Active Radio and Why Did I Write This? Thank you for listening.